Hilchos Shevuos Perek Shishi, the Laws of Oaths, Chapter 6. This is the last chapter that deals with the laws relating to a standard oath, and the topic of today is what's on the screen known as Heter Shevuos, the idea of releasing oaths. The Torah gives us a mechanism by which a person can permit an oath that was made and bound him to a prohibition. Using a certain mechanism that Rambam will describe in today's chapter, it's possible to undo the oath and no longer be bound by it. Says the Rambam, Halacha Aleph, Misha Nishba Shevuos Bitoy V'nicham Al Shevuosai. A person took an oath of expression, a standard oath, and then he regretted his oath. V'roa shehu mitztayer im mikayim shvuazu. And he sees that he's going to be in a lot of pain if he keeps the oath. V'nefcha daita l'das acheres, and his mind changes to another perspective. Oisha neilad le'davar shalei haya b'daitoi. Or a new circumstance came about which wasn't on his mind when he made the oath. And because of the new circumstance, he has regret for making the original oath. He is allowed to, nishal literally means to go through a series of questioning, because that's how it would usually happen. You would go to a sage and he would ask you a whole bunch of questions which would ultimately lead to the nullification of the oath. But the way they translate it here in the English, which is an easier translation, is he appeals. He appeals to one individual sage, or he can approach three regular people if there's no great sage who is authorized or expert in releasing oaths. And this group of three, or the one great sage, can permit the oath. The Rambam says these three have to be basic, just common people. In the Shulchan Aruch, it says they have to be at least a little knowledgeable, even if they're not qualified to be called a sage, a major chacham, but they have to have some kind of basic knowledge in the Torah, wisdom. And they can release the oath. And after the release, the person will be permitted to do that which he swore he wouldn't do, or he will be allowed not to do that which he swore he was going to do. This is called the release of the oaths. Notice that Rambam only said this when it comes to a Shevuos Bitoy, because that's the only oath that can be released. And even then, it has to be a future oath. An oath of the past, of course, cannot be released because you've already done what you're swearing about, and neither can an oath of deposit or an oath of testimony be subject to these regular laws of release. Although the commentaries do say that if a person made a false oath in the past, he should nullify it because it brings down the prohibition's severity. Halacha beis v'davar zeh ein lo ikar klal b'teira shebiksav. Fascinatingly, says the Rambam, this concept of releasing oaths has no source in the written Torah. Elakach lamdu mimoshe rabbeinu mipi kabbalah. It was learned straight from Moses in an oral tradition. Shazeh hakasuv, that when the verse says lo yachel dvarai, that when a person makes an oath, he should not desecrate his word, it only means shelo yechalel hu ba'atzmai derech kalus reish b'shat nefesh. It means that he alone, on his own accord, shouldn't desecrate his oath in a way of frivolousness, in cold blood, so to speak. Ki inyan shenemar, as it says elsewhere with regard to false oaths, that the reason that you shouldn't make a false oath is v'chilalta es shem elikecha, because that way you cause desecration to God's name. Avalim nichan v'chazar bay. But if you do it properly, you have regret, and you want to retract your oath, chacham mater loy, then you can have a sage who will release the oath. It's not considered desecrating the oath. It's forbidden for a person to release his own oath. And additionally, you cannot serve as the rabbi to release an oath or a vow if there's a rabbi greater than you in wisdom. And in a place where your own teacher is dwelling, the sage cannot permit release oaths without the consent of his teacher. It has to be the person who made the oath that comes before the sage to release him. Whether it's a man or a woman. A person cannot appoint an agent to appeal his own oath, his own vow. Except a husband can become an agent for his wife's regret and will release the oath of the wife through the agency of the husband, as we'll talk about more extensively in the laws of vows, the power that a husband has over his wife's oaths and vows. This dispensation where a husband can be an agent for his wife is only if the three people who are serving as the court that's nullifying the oath, only if they were already gathered in place. They were in session, and he approaches them, he can act as an agent for his wife. He should not bring them together initially to release his wife's oath or vow. Additionally, a husband cannot become an agent to nullify his wife's vow, the commentaries here explain that Rambam is referring to sitting on the court. The husband cannot sit on the court that releases his wife's oath. While he can be an agent in front of a court, he cannot be part of the court. Halacha hey, keitzad matirin. What is the process by which an oath is released? Yovei hanishba lechacham hamuvak. The person who made the oath comes to the great expert sage, or to the three regular people if there's no expert. And he says, I made an oath concerning such and such a matter, and I have regret. Had I known that I would be in such pain, to the extent that I am in now, or had I known that the unforeseen circumstance would happen to me, I wouldn't make the oath. And had my mind been as it is now, at the time of the oath, I wouldn't have made the oath, thereby expressing his regret. In response, the sage, or the greatest of the three people that are gathered, they say to him, they confirm, have you already had regret? And he says, yes, indeed I have regret. The expert judge, or the greater of the three, goes back and says, it's permitted to you, it's released for you, it's pardoned for you. Or anything which communicates this idea in any language. But it has to be one of these expressions of permission or pardon which imply a complete revocation of the oath. That's the power of the sages. Using their logic and the power invested in them, they're able to revoke the oath as though it never existed. But if all the expert will say is, it's cancelled for you, or your oath is uprooted, or an expression similar to that, his words are meaningless. Because nullification, cancellation, is a power given only to a husband or a father. The commentaries explain these words in Hebrew connote a cancellation here on out. With their authority, they have the power to override the oath or the vow that a wife or a daughter makes and stop it from going into power any further. A sage, by contrast, who revokes the vow to begin with, uses a word of permission or pardon in his cancellation of the oath or the vow. Relatives are kosher to be on the court that permits releases, oaths, or vows. We can also do the release of oaths at night and even while standing. Because this release isn't considered a judicial procedure, which requires, like every judicial procedure, that it be by day, judges be seated, and no relatives are allowed. Here it's not, so all these things don't apply. Therefore, as well, we may appeal an oath or a vow on Shabbos, if it was for the needs of Shabbos. Shabbos necessitated the release. You want the court to facilitate a release so you can be able to eat or drink on Shabbos, which is an obligation. Even in the case where a person had an opportunity, he had enough time to release his oath or vow on Friday, he can still release the oath on Shabbos as long as it's for the necessity of Shabbos. Of course, if it's not allowed. But if it's for Shabbos' needs, you can go ahead and release the oath on Shabbos, even though usually judicial procedures cannot be carried out on Shabbos. Halacha Zayin Reuven shehishbia l'Shimon. If Reuven adjured Shimon, he placed Shimon under oath. V'ana amen ekibal hashvua, and Shimon answered amen or accepted the oath in some other form, as we saw in chapter 2. V'nicham Shimon al shvuasei v'nishal aleha. Shimon, the acceptor of the oath, ultimately regrets his oath and wants to appeal it. Ein matirin le'ela bifnei Reuven shehishbia. The halacha is the court cannot release his oath unless it's in the presence of Reuven, who adjured him originally. V'cheinim nishba Reuven enadar. Similarly, if Reuven made an oath or a vow, that he will not have pleasure from Shimon, or that Shimon will not have pleasure from him, and Reuven then undergoes regret, and he wants to appeal the oath or the vow to a sage. You cannot, the court cannot release the oath unless it's in the presence of Shimon, from whom he made this vow against deriving benefit. Even if Shimon, the second person in question, was a minor or a Gentile, an idol-worshipping Gentile, we cannot release Reuven's oath unless it's in the presence of Shimon, so that the subject of the vow should be aware that the person who made the vow or the oath has released his vow or oath, and therefore he's allowed to provide benefit whatever way the oath was made. Otherwise, if you don't do it in his presence, you're going to see him violating the oath and you're not going to understand. So whenever the oath involves another person, both have to be present for the release to be valid. Whether one takes an oath privately or in public, it can be released. Even if he swears using Hashem's ineffable name, the God of Israel, and then he has regret, he can appeal his oath and they will release it. But if he pronounces his oath on the consent of others, or his vow on the consent of others, you can never release the oath unless a mitzvah matter is concerned. Because the whole idea of regret is that if my mind had been the way it was now, that it was in the oath, then I wouldn't make the oath. In other words, it represents a change of mind. But when you make a vow or an oath on somebody else's consent, you dismiss your mind from the equation. Now we don't care what happens to your mind later, a new circumstance, doesn't matter. It's what other people's mind that matters. And therefore, the oath that you made can never be released. Halacha tes ketzad, what would that look like? Nishba v'tola shvuasei b'das rabim shelo yehana b'pleini lo'elam. A person makes an oath, and he places his oath on the consent of the public, and he says, I swear, by your consent, that this man will never derive benefit from me ever, or I will never derive benefit from that person forever. And then the people in the city needed a teacher, or a bris, a mohel, or a slaughterer. And the only person available was this guy. Since a mitzvah is involved, he can appeal to a sage or to 3 regular people and release the oath. And do those mitzvahs, and not just perform the mitzvahs on their behalf. And he could even take payment from the very same people about whom he swore that he would never have benefit from them. Some commentators say he shouldn't take payment, but the bottom line is, according to the Rambam, if not taking payment means you wouldn't do it in the most proper or the most high efficiency way, then even take payment if that's what it takes. Halacha yud misha nishba v'lo nicham al shvuasei. A person makes an oath and never experienced regret for his oath. Uba lebeis din lekayim shvuasei. And in fact, he comes to court to confirm, to certify his oath. I want a statement from the court that says that my oath is good and it's valid. Imro hadayanin sheheter shvuazu greidim lemitzvah u'leshalim ben ish li ishtay ben adam lachaveira. If the court sees with their wisdom that actually if they release this oath, that's going to cause more mitzvahs or more peace between husband and wife, or more peace between man and his friend. On the other hand, certifying the oath will actually cause more quarreling and more sin. Then actually the court will open up a doorway for him. In other words, illustrate what's the consequences of his oath. Discuss with him at length the matter. Let him know what the oath is going to cause until he experiences regret of his own accord. If indeed he has regret because of their words, we permit it for him. If he doesn't regret and he stays put, stubborn on his position, then they have to do what they have to do, and they'll certify his oath. Ketzad, what would this look like? Nishbashi yegarish as ishtay, v'shelo yehana Yisrael min chasav, v'shelo yechal basar, v'shelo yishtay yayin, shleishim yayin, v'chayetze bazeh. The Rambam gives a few scenarios. A person makes an oath to divorce his wife. A person makes an oath that Mr. A is never going to have benefit from his possessions. A person makes an oath he never wants to drink wine or eat meat for 30 days. Something like that. The court will tell him, B'ni, my son, listen. If you're going to divorce your wife, bad rumors are going to spread about your kids. People are going to wonder, why did the mother of these kids get divorced? Later on in the future, they're going to be calling these kids sons of a divorcee. That's going to cause bad lineage, reputations. It's going to cause bad things. Or even if there's no risk of bad reputation. If your wife goes ahead and marries somebody else, you'll never be able to remarry her even if you regret the divorce. Or similar things which could inspire him to full regret. Or also the other oath. You made an oath. You don't want this guy to ever have pleasure from your property. What's going to happen? Maybe this guy is going to run out of money. He's going to go bankrupt. And you're going to transgress the prohibition in the Torah, which says, the commandment which says, you have to have your brother live with you and provide for him. And open up your hand, give tzedakah. By your own oath, you're not going to be able to give tzedakah. Where the other oath you made, you're not going to eat meat or drink wine 30 days. You know what's happening in 30 days? Holiday is coming in 30 days. You're going to cancel your own joy of the holiday by not drinking wine and eating meat, as the commandment is. Also Shabbos, Shabbos. During 30 days is Shabbat every 7 days. You're not going to be having pleasure on Shabbos. Im Amar, if in response to these words the man says, "Oh, you're right. Had I known this, I would never have sworn." The court will release the oath. But if he says, "Nevertheless, I don't regret. I want everything. I want all the consequences," we don't permit it, and we let him go on his way. Halacha Yud Beis ein poischin b'neilad. The court cannot open up a pathway to regret by using future circumstances. Which means, Ketzad, what does that mean? Nishba shelo yehana bipleini, a person made an oath that he's never going to have pleasure from a certain guy. V'nasa sofer ha'ir. That guy becomes the city scribe. Now he needs tefillin for his son's bar mitzvah. Hoyel v'lei nicham al shvuasai. Since essentially what happened over here? The guy never really regretted his oath. He really doesn't want to have benefit from this guy. Had the guy not gotten the job of the scribe, he would say, you know what, be that, goodbye and good riddance. Don't be the scribe, I don't need you. So since he never really regretted, it's only a new circumstance, the court cannot use this as a mechanism to begin releasing his oath. Even if he says himself, had I known he was going to become the scribe, I would never have sworn, it's not enough to release the oath. Since he never really regretted, if you asked him if he could have it his way, what would he say? He would say, I want that I shouldn't have benefit from the guy and he shouldn't become the scribe. But if indeed he experiences regret because of the new circumstance and his mind changes, then we do release the oath on this basis, and same thing with any similar circumstances. Halacha Yud Gimel. A person makes an oath about something, and then just to make it stronger, he makes another oath that he's never going to release the first oath. And then he regrets. He must first appeal the second oath, where he made the oath not to release the oath. So he needs to express regret about that oath, undo that oath, and then he can appeal the first oath, because there's no second oath hanging over him, not allowing him to do it. Yudalid nishba shelo yedaber in pleini. A person makes an oath, he's not going to speak to somebody. V'nishba achar kach she'im yishal al shvuazu v'yatira yiya'aser lishtis yayin la'ilam. Then he makes a second oath and he says, if I release this oath, I swear I'll never drink wine. V'nicham, and now he has regret. Harezeh nishal al shvua harishayna umatira v'achar kach yishoel al hashniya. In this case, he's actually allowed to first appeal the first oath and release it, and then appeal the second oath. Because you don't release an oath or a vow which hasn't gone into effect yet. This oath only goes into effect if he releases the first oath. So you can't go ahead and release this one because the oath never came into effect. He never was forbidden to drink wine till he releases the first oath. So he goes to court, releases the first oath. That brings the second oath into effect. Now he can release it. Lefichach, therefore, if a man was standing during the month of Nisan, and he makes an oath that beginning from the new month of Iyar, the next new month, I'm not going to eat meat for 30 days, and he has regret, he cannot appeal the oath until Iyar comes in, because that's when the oath goes into effect. A person makes an oath, he's never going to derive benefit from a certain individual. And he's also not going to derive benefit from the sage by whom he appeals this oath. He must go in order. First appeal the first oath, because that will bring the second oath into effect. Only now is there a sage by whom he appealed the oath, to whom the oath will apply. And then he can appeal the second oath to take away the prohibition of giving benefit to that sage. He makes an oath he's not going to have pleasure from somebody, and that if he appeals that oath, he should be a Nazirite. Same principle. First appeal the oath of deriving benefit. That will bring the second oath into effect of becoming a Nazirite, and then appeal your oath of being a Nazirite. And the same thing applies to all similar situations. Yud Zayin, Shevuos Shalei Oichal Hayom, Shevuos Shalei Oichal Hayom, Shevuos Shalei Oichal Hayom. A person says 3 times, I swear I won't eat today, I swear I won't eat today, I swear I won't eat today. Oisha Amar Al Kikarzu. Or same thing about 1 loaf of bread. Shevuos Shalei Echlena, Shevuos Shalei Echlena, Shevuos Shalei Echlena. I swear I won't eat it, I swear I won't eat it, I swear I won't eat it. V'nishal al Shevuah Rishayna v'hutra. And he appeals only the first oath, and it gets released. He's still bound by the second oath. If he appeals the second oath, he's still liable for the third oath. If he only appeals the third oath, he's still liable for the first 2. If he appeals the second one, he's liable for the first one. Each oath, although they're repeats, and they're really the same thing, they each remain in effect to the point that they each require their own release. If so, why did we repeatedly say in these laws that one oath cannot take effect over and above a second oath? That principle only is said in regards to punishment or consequence, that if he would transgress these oaths and eat, we only hold him liable once. But the fact that there are 3 oaths hanging in the balance over him, that reality stays. And if he wants to appeal the oath, he has to appeal each individual oath before being allowed to do so, to do whatever he swore not to do. A person swore a futuristic oath of expression and lied. He made an oath not to eat a loaf of bread and he ate it. After he transgressed the oath, before bringing the sacrifice in the case of an inadvertent, or before being lashed in a case of a purposeful violation, he jumps in, expresses regret, appeals it to a sage, and the sage releases the oath. So after he's violated it, before he got punished. He is indeed exempt from going through with the punishment. Not only that, even if they bent him over the pole. In the Rambam's 14th book, he describes that the lashes were given when the person was bent over. So they even bent him over and tied him to the pole where they were going to give him lashes. And he appealed the oath in that state. And the sages released the oath before they began to flog him. He is exempt. Because the permission, the release, revokes the oath as though it never existed. Retroactively, the violation was never a violation, and therefore, he's exempt from punishment.